As you think about the past 7 months that have been delightful in every way, clearly, what has been one superpower you have had to gain over the past 7 months to excel in your life? What, you put that in the chat? What has been one place that you have had to gain a strength that beforehand you perhaps didn't know you had, perhaps didn't want to have? But if we were going to look at you today as opposed to 7 months ago, let's see what those strengths would be. See a lot of patience. I'm guessing that those, I think my favorite so far isn't just patience. It's the person who typed patience in all caps, shouting patience at us. That's nice. Zoom tech extraordinaire. Yes, all the technical expertise that we need. I'll say that one of mine certainly has been cooking. I was in the air about 50,000 miles last year. And so cooking has been reintroduced to the chagrin of my children, perhaps. These are great. Dishwashing, if anyone wants to hire Nabil to come over to your place in a COVID-friendly manner, right? I let Ryan, home improvement master guru. That is a great one. I feel like that one needs a business card. We're putting in there, if you're just coming in the room, what is one superpower that you have had to develop over the past 7 months? It does look like patience is winning right now. I'm guessing that could be patience with technology. I'm guessing that could be patience with having to be in this time of isolation. I'm guessing for many that is patience actually with coworkers that you never asked for, never knew you were going to have as coworkers. I've seen that come up more than once as well. Patience with your new puppy, Wes. That is clearly something we're going to need a screenshot of some point. That will make everybody happier, right? Okay, and we have 2 minutes left as you're putting it mind reading. Jennifer, you could teach all of us this, that'd be good. So here's the other thing I would like to ask you to do before we get started in a moment. It's going to be chaotic, so I will tell you what we're doing and then we'll do it. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to unmute literally everybody on this call. And we are just for a moment going to say hi and wave at each other. Actually verbally say hi. Then you will all mute again. All right? So unmute, don't say anything yet. Just unmute, everyone unmute. You can do it. You ready for the chaos? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everyone say hi.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
See, okay, you can mute back, but isn't that nice? Right? A moment of connection, right? You know, no matter whether you have many or few chapters, whether you are near or far, it's the connection that we're all looking for. Connection is what allows us to better understand what our chapters are doing. Connection is what allows us to better understand the volunteers. It's connections what we're missing in isolation. Connection's as easy as unmuting, waving, and saying hi to one another. And I'm guessing for some of you, you'll actually remember that moment better than some of the slides that I may share today. But I would just implore that as we talk about what it's like to have difficult conversations, right? The stuff that perhaps isn't the happiest topic in the room, that what you remember is that any conversation is going to be easier if it comes with the hopeful implication, the invitation to connection. And so start any chapter call that way, start any leader call that way, right? Some moment of connection that doesn't have to be a trust fall, but does put you in touch with other people. So we're going to start today with talking about difficult conversations, the key to a better future with them, and hopefully go through a little bit about how better listening will help us with the difficult conversations. And so, as painful as it may be, I want you to try to picture in your mind a difficult conversation that you've had. Perhaps it is of late, perhaps it is further back in your life. But when you think about that tough conversation, that difficult conversation, for a moment, how did it make you feel? And here's what I would like you to do. I'm putting a link in the chat there. I would just like you for that moment to share with us in one word or 2 word descriptors, if you will, as you think about it. How did it make you feel? You can text it if you want to 22333, or you can follow the link. Anxious is a really good response. Stressed, scared. Of course, with word clouds, the bigger the word, the more people are using that word, right? Unsure and nervous, uncomfortable, worried and deflated. As you're sharing these, I will say it is rare that I start sessions from a place of negative. But I think this is what's important in the short time we have to talk about this topic, is that what is not successful in uncomfortable, difficult conversations is shying away from the reality of their difficult nature. It doesn't mean you have to be trapped in that reality, right? But it does mean that recognizing it before you go into it can hopefully allow you to tame the beast a little bit, right? Putting voice to it can let you recognize what you're fearing you're going to experience, but then hopefully it helps you recognize that there's the potential to change what that experience is going to be. I'll let this keep going. You can on your own screen show it. I'll also share it and give it to Peggy afterwards. But if you know you're about to go in and have a difficult conversation, right? Having this as your difficult conversation word cloud, right? To say, all right, what is it that I'm afraid that I'm going to experience during this? So I hopefully get a better idea of what I don't want to experience, can be a very, I hope, useful tool. So if we're going to have them, right, as much as we may want to avoid them at times, has anyone wanted to avoid a difficult conversation sometimes, right? Why do we have to have them? Now, I'll tell you some of the reasons that I see, right, is that first, differing points of view, you get broader perspectives, right? If you are in an echo chamber of similar points of view to your own, how are you ever going to have a different point of view, right? How are you ever going to grow your own understanding? That can often come from a difficult conversation. Often, if you're going to have to negotiate like success and progress, it's going to be with someone who has to give, just as you have to give in any partnership. Difficult conversations are how you negotiate success, as well as to determine acceptable parameters. One of the biggest parts that the difficult part comes without the conversation is when you're not operating from the same parameters, right? And so what are the parameters of what we're willing to speak about? What are the parameters of what we find to be acceptable in any community, in our conversation, in our relationship, right? I have a close colleague who has a supervisor that want to use many curse words just as part of their vernacular, right? At some point they had a difficult conversation to say, it is hard for me to have a professional conversation when every other word out of your mouth is something I'm not comfortable with. Is there something we can do about that, right? If you don't set parameters and be honest about how you're comfortable, how do you get to that place? Difficult conversations help you build decisions of consensus, right? Reach places of agreement where varied voices have to be given the space to be heard. Without the difficult conversation with many voices, you're not going to hear that. And it's because of difficult conversations that you can experience an apology or forgiveness. I have a colleague who had a friend, right? Who the friend said that they were busy and then came literally to their city on a trip. They saw it on Instagram. The friend never reached out and they didn't talk for about 2 or 3 years until she confronted, right, the difficult conversation of like, I saw this and it hurt me. And they were able to like get back together and be friends again, right? The hurdle of having the difficult conversation prevented that. Yet all they needed was a chance to apologize and get forgiveness and to become a better person. The purpose of me saying this is you should go in with the, like, why am I having this conversation, right? And hopefully a part of it is going to be that like in a difficult conversation, we better understand others. We understand what they think, what they believe, or what they feel. That if we're able to employ empathy to the logic of what they say, so much of what someone else says that's not logical to us sounds different because we have such a different structural, cultural starting place. And so understanding through their eyes is going to help that. So you're going to go into what? What do you do before the conversation? What is the win? So if you're going to have one of these tough conversations, this is the first thing that, like, before you go in, as you center yourself, right? What is the win that's actually going to make it a win for you, right? Is the output that you are striving for understanding? Is the output you're striving for actual action from the other party? Or is the output that you're looking for actually just some venting, right? The idea that sometimes we have these conversations because we have such pent up frustration. If the win is venting, is it the person that you need to vent at the good first person to have that conversation with, right? You know, Jason asked a good question. Is there a win? If you're not able to articulate to yourself what success looks like from the conversation, right? What you are hoping for, not knowing how it's going to go, how do you then direct the scope of the conversation? How do you then transparently share your intention for it? Starting with, you know, if you will, a strategic mindset of what is the win, right? Is that a starting place that we can both adhere to? And so being really clear about that, key. And if you can do that, then what's going to prevent the win? To some of these, it's past feelings or past hurts, which it could be worthwhile to share. Or if it has just been a repetitive process, how do you recognize that there comes a place in time with certain parties where their behavior is not one that's going to change, right? Where what they have done in the past is a pattern. And either you will need to find a way to not interact, or if you're going to interact and have the hard conversation, right? If you're not in a place of coaching, if you're not in a place to be able to give that feedback where you need a sustainable and intimate relationship, how do you steel yourself against what you know their patterns have been in the past? I do like that, Susan, that sometimes just having the conversation is a win in terms of the hurdles to get past. I like that a lot. What else is going to prevent the win? We have inherent bias sometimes. Now, inherent bias can be, within the realm of diversity, certainly, and inclusion and equity and those places we're talking about. Inherent bias could also be from within natural structural places, right? If someone is a higher level executive to me, are they going to talk in a demeaning way? If someone is coming from a component of strength that looks at national as a competitor, are they going to start from a place of thinking I'm trying to get something out of them or swindle them or do something to them, right? What are the inherent biases that we're bringing in and that we're fearing are there? And then there's differing points of view, right? These could all prevent a win. So if you're structuring the hard conversation, knowing what you want to accomplish, recognizing what could be a hindrance to it, right? What you want to then think about is, how do I set up the space to best have the conversation, right? Have you set the stage to actually have the conversation that you need, right? In other words, where are you having it, right? Is what setting is being most conductive? If it's in one person's office, right, and they're on the other side in a place of power, is that conducive, right? If it is, I don't know, with a global chapter and you're having it 3 a.m. their time, is that conducive, right? And if you're actually having this in person, what always amazes me when I see the difficult conversations and they're at a board table and they're at opposite ends of the board table because they think that having to shout at each other to hear each other is going to be good for it. How do you actually structure where people are seated when we get back to in person so you're able, right, to hear and see each other? Of anything we communicate, 30% of our understanding comes from body language. That's what makes this little headshot boxes so difficult, right? If you're hiding your body language, how do you know what you're feeling, right? How do you know what they're feeling? So think about that and how you structure it. And how do you reset before a conversation? So how many Zoom meetings do you have a day? 5? 3? Nina, I see, says 10. I think my over-under is 12 to 13. I am sure that what you do, right, is you have a good 5-10 minute break between each meeting, right? Anyone do back-to-back meetings? If you do back-to-back meetings, right, how are you walking into a difficult conversation with a reset, right? How are you walking in as a blank slate? If you know it's going to be difficult, you need to like step back, let go of what's been before, and be present and come with a blank slate, right? So something about that, do you have quick sensory triggers that could help you? And so one thing I like to use as an example of this, if you happen to be a parent and have a small child, if you happen to be an aunt or uncle, right? Or if you happen to be an animal parent, right? The next time your child, pet of care, either does a cute bark or a laugh, you need to try to capture that on your phone. And before you go into the difficult conversation, you listen to the laugh once or twice. It will not make the difficult conversation any more resolved, right? But what it will do is it will trigger your emotions to like be a little bit calmer, right? It's a reset button. Lori, I like that idea. So if you have your own reset buttons, please share them in the chat. So go in knowing what the win is, what's going to prevent the win, what setting do you need to have it, and how do you create a blank space? Right? So as we talk about like how to approach the conversation, right? Manners matter and they demonstrate that you care about the person. I say this because often we jump in with someone we don't want to have a conversation with and go straight at it, right? We either will perhaps not be on the attack, but certainly be on the defensive. Places of personal inquiry that are meaningful can actually help set the stage for better hearing and listening, right? The power of being polite. Like there is hardly ever a reason for which to be rude. Can you be polite in how you communicate? And if you feel yourself about to tip, right? There's a whole session we could do in yoga and the power of a few deep breaths to reset as well. Filling space versus taking a pause, right? Can really help make sure that what happens in the conversation is much more meaningful. Let's talk, oh, my table's sideways. So you should set yours right way so they don't all fall. But let's talk about setting the table, right? Setting the table means that in the conversation you approach, what's the agreement on the topics you're going to discuss? You're both on the same page, as well as agreement on what you're trying to accomplish during those discussions, as well as agreement on the timing, right? These are all ground rules that you and the other party should be on the same page about. Because if you're not going to be having the same conversation. Within the conversation, the difficult, focusing on questions is key, right? Understanding is achieved through inquiry. So what are questions that stink, right? What are questions that we do not like? You can put some in the chat if you want. Questions that do not help during hard conversations. Questions such as, is that what you really think, right? Questions such as, well, what brought you to that conclusion? Or questions such as, can you get to the point already? I had some other ones that I were told not to put on the screen, so I didn't. But I'm sure you have heard some choice questions that have had you step back and react as well, right? What's the intention behind the questions that you're using, right? To use a Stephen Covey quote, are you listening to reply, right? Or are you listening to understand when you hear a question? Are you trying to take on the other person's point of view, right? Because if you're going to be an empathetic listener, there's 5 different ways that we listen, right? We make pretend to listen, but really ignore what the other person's saying, stuck in our own reality. We pretend that we listen, nodding our head, but still not taking anything in. We selectively listen, something else is going on, we'll hear a catchphrase or two or a word. There's attentive listening, which actually means I'm engaged, I can tell you what you said, but then I'm going to give you examples of myself. Or there's empathetic listening, which is actually trying to be in the other person's shoes, right? It means you're actually trying to embody what they are trying to say, what they are trying to feel, and then be able to hopefully give that back. If you know that, then what are the questions that you want, right? Are they open-ended? So there's the chance for dialogue, right? Are they seeking the other person's vision and understanding because you know yours, right? Even if their win isn't your win, are your questions trying to understand what their win is, right? And can you ask questions that verify complementary connectors? We are on different pages, but I think we're in the same space here. Does that sound right to you, right? If you can identify some bridges of connection, that at least opens the door to hearing each other. As for what you hear, right? We all use filters. And this is the reason, like we could do a whole session on filters, but our brain gets millions of sounds, right? Every minute. It has to filter quickly. So we're looking for identifiers that quickly help us then manage what we are hearing. It's why you can go in and hear, how are you doing today? I'm doing okay. And one person can hear that as, oh, that person's depressed. And someone else can hear that and say, oh, that person's doing just fine, right? We have different expectations and intentions. What filters are we applying to these conversations? And so you need to ask questions of verification, right? What I heard you say was, and is that correct? After you make a statement, say whether or not you agree is what I'm saying makes sense, right? Make the other person verify they've heard what you said, right? That their filters have not stopped them hearing you. Those identification questions don't need to be demeaning, right? They make sure that you're at a place of continual understanding. Because the ability to hear what we're saying to one another directly impacts our ability to understand and to dialogue, to agree, or to even disagree with respect. So the hard parts, right? I want to try and voice where I think we are not on the same page. The win of difficult conversations doesn't always mean you get to a place that you agree, right? Agreement is not always the win. If you're going to fire someone, you're not always going to agree on the outcome. It may be the outcome that's going to happen, right? But you're not going to get them to a happy place of agreement, right? That being said, you can't avoid the hard parts of it, right? And so I want to try and voice where I think we're not on the same page, helps identify where hopefully the places of disconnect are so you can be on the same page, right? I hear what you're saying. Can I also share my perspective on it, right? Someone who keeps going and keeps going, asking their permission to share your perspective. And look, if the person won't let you share your perspective, then they're not at the table looking to have a hard conversation that's productive, right? They're just looking perhaps to be in that venting space. It doesn't seem like we're going to get to the same place on this. What does moving forward look like without that, right? At some point, the time elapses on your calendar. At some point, like the resolution is not going to be a final one. If we can't agree, then what does progress look like? And how do we adjust to that reality? And help is not a bad word, right? Recognize that what do you need to have the best conversation? Is it a neutral space, right? Is it that you need a third party with you? And by third party, it can be someone who is not part of the heated discussion you need to have, but can help moderate the discussion. Mediators are automatically sort of triggered that we're in a conflict, but a facilitator that can help the conversation along can actually be a neutral third party that can help. What's important about that, though, it isn't backup you're bringing like your gang to protect you during your fight, right? And sometimes it's helpful to agree that you're going to have actually transcription of what you discussed so that we don't have memories that are forgetful after, but we actually have something that says this is what we agreed to. As we wrap up, as we think about hard conversations, you need to come to a place of what did we accomplish and what's next, right? Did we come to an agreement? Did we just come to a shared understanding, right? Were we able to communicate better? Did we be able to repair or build a relationship? Or ultimately, were we just able to come to the place that we've agreed upon a singular action? And when you leave a difficult conversation, right, you should be able to answer these questions and have the same answers. Who's taking the next step from this if there is one? When is it happening? What is the action they're taking? What has to be communicated? And what documenting next steps is needed, right? We walked out, we didn't agree. This is what we've agreed is happening next. I'm sending an email to confirm that that's the case. You agree about it during the conversation so it doesn't feel like that you're trying to like trap them in something afterwards. And hopefully we started in a place of what are those feelings that you're worried about to start with? What are the feelings that you want to end with, right? If I asked you that question, right? And I said, what do you want to end with the feelings? If you knew that, could you direct then your actions to try to get to that win, to that end point, right? If you can say how you want to feel at the end, and how do you know along the way that you're headed there, that can hopefully help guide how you interact, how you speak, and what you seek to learn. And then how do you want them to feel at the end, right? It may not always be happy, but if you have an intention of their feelings, that will guide you as well. So last thoughts. Hard conversations are a reality of learning, of progress, of evolution. The more you avoid them, the harder they fester and become. Do not avoid them if you can at all have them. Right? Recognize that you have to listen to others, but also listen to yourself, right? Within yourself, do you have the intention of this being a positive outcome and experience? Recognize that the actions that you take during a conversation set the precedent for what is acceptable, and so do your words. They teach your subordinates who are looking to you, for example, they teach your chapters in terms of how National will treat them, and they teach your colleagues in terms of what kind of colleague you're going to be. Last thing, and then I'll give it over because we have a second session coming right now. This is an imperfect moment when there's lots of hard conversations we never expected to have, right? Give yourself the space and the grace to be imperfect. Give the other person the space and the grace to be imperfect right now. Hard conversations aren't about perfection. They're about growing and finding out what the better way is of moving forward together and of getting to a better endpoint that hopefully serves both your parties. At the end of the day, the easy conversations are easy for a reason, but meaningful change, right? That is what is going to come from having the hard ones. I hope that's at least some places to start in terms of thinking about what different approaches could be to having difficult conversations, and that there's somewhere that you'll approach them a little differently. That is a little quick TED Talk-esque presentation.